Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Mitra Kumar. I'm a fellow international scholar and a PhD candidate at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And I'm very, very excited to be moderating today's session on navigating the academic job search as an international scholar and learning more about this topic from our incredibly impressive panel of speakers. So before we get started, I would like to introduce each of them briefly. So first we have Dr. Ishita Basu, an assistant professor in the neurosurgery department at the University of Cincinnati. Next, we have Dr. Marina Bedran, an assistant professor of Portuguese in the Department of Modern Languages and Literature at Johns Hopkins University. And our third speaker of the day is Suhas Ishwarappa Pramila, who's currently a PhD student in the Department of Material Sciences and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much, speakers, for joining us. On behalf of all the participants and organizers, I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. And for our participants, please use the chat to ask questions relevant to the discussion. I will definitely try to incorporate them as we go along. So please don't be shy and ask away. So I think one of the first things I wanted to do was get to know our panelists a little bit better. So can you please tell us about your academic background? So when and why did you decide to pursue academia in the US? Ishita, let's start with you.
Hi all, I'm Ishita Basu. So basically I'm an electrical / neural engineer by training, and my engineering background started in Calcutta, India, where I'm from. I went to Jadavpur University there for my Bachelor of Engineering. And I actually wanted to pursue graduate education in the US pretty early on, because I believed, and I still believe, that US is like the best place for graduate training. And I actually wanted to come here for my undergraduate studies. And my mother said, no, you first need to learn how to live by yourself in the country, and then you can venture outside. So I started preparing for my GRE and everything when I was getting my bachelor's degree. So I took my GRE in my final year. And as you know, it takes like about a year to apply to different universities. So I worked there for a year before I came to University of Illinois at Chicago for my PhD in electrical engineering. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I decided during my high school bachelor's that I wanted to come here for graduate studies. Yeah.
Thanks, Ishita. I think that definitely seems like a journey a lot of us can connect with. So next up, Marina, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and when and why you decided to pursue academia in the US?
Sure, thank you, Mitra. For me, well, I'm originally from Brazil, and I did my undergrad there. I trained in anthropology and the social sciences in general, and I was not sure that I was going to come here. I didn't have this in mind, because in Brazil, like we have like more, I think, well, it used to be like this. I think I was sort of like in a transitional generation, because like we were more in contact with, especially in the social sciences, with friends and with other places in Europe in general. So I did my master's in, I got a master's degree in literature. I started to study like comparative literature. And at that point, I was like sort of planning on doing a PhD, or like at least like a sort of like an exchange program with friends. But then, you know, as it turns out, I was also like, I started working with at a cultural institution doing like iconographic research and working with like publishing. And it was a moment in which I started having like a lot of contact with the US, with like universities, with scholars, with artists. And then at that moment, I also started traveling to the US like often. And then I realized how, you know, the sort of like academic training here for the PhD was much more interesting in terms of how much access you have to a much more global academic environment. And that's when I also started considering this. I finished the master's and I applied for the PhD here, which I also found that also like offers you a way to sort of like combine much of what I had studied so far, which means like anthropology, like literature, and my interest in images. So that's when that's what brought me to the US.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Suhas, can you share a little bit more about yourself and, what drew you to academia, and how did you decide that you want to be a faculty in the US?
Absolutely. I had sort of an interesting story. So back in high school, one of my mom's boss was cleaning out her office because she was retiring. And she had this book about a Nobel laureate, C.V. Raman. He's an Indian Nobel laureate in science. And she said, hey, I'm cleaning out my office. Take this book to your son. And she wrote this message like, hey, good luck, with your future. And she gave me that book. And when I started reading that book, I quickly discovered that the Nobel laureate lived in my city. He worked in the city. And his house happened to be next to my high school. So every chapter I read, I learned more and more. And I sort of quickly became very interested in science. So I grew up near Indian Institute of Science, and I used to visit there often. And that's how kind of my interest in science sort of picked up. I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering in RV College of Engineering in Bangalore. And at the same time, I think I really got a very early peek into the research world by going to these research talks and other things in Indian Institute of Science. By the time I was graduating, I thought to myself, well, what kind of work I want to do? And some of the professors in the US, their work is something that really caught my eye. I applied and I got into Arizona State University for my master's in material science and engineering. I completed that, and then I jumped to Hopkins, where I'm currently doing my PhD. I'll be done soon, but I'm right now in the material science and engineering department. Yeah, I was drawn to kind of the innovation and the freedom that the US offered for researchers, and so that's what sort of drew me here.
Well, thanks, Suhas. I hope that there's a book published about you someday, and that inspires more kids to start their journey in science. So thank you everyone for sharing a little bit about yourself. And our audience members, they turned in some questions when we asked them to register. So I'm going to try my best to incorporate all the questions that were asked during the registration process. Thank you, audience. One thing I would just like to highlight is we did have a few questions about the application process or the job search process outside the US, which might be a little bit out of scope for today. However, if you need more resources, please feel free to reach out to us or anyone in the PHutures office, and we'll try our best to connect you with the right resources. So one of the, I think, recurring themes in a lot of the questions that were submitted, I noticed, was the importance of publications, like our scholarly activity, and I think how important it is to do a postdoc. There were a lot of questions about, what is the importance of a postdoc, how long should a postdoc be, and I think it's great that we have two of our panelists who sort of have different paths. So we have Ishita, who did 2 amazing postdocs, very impressive. At the same time, there's Suhas, who's, I think, trying to jump into that faculty role right out of his PhD. So I think, for Ishita, I just wanted to know a little bit more about what made you decide to do this postdocs, and how important do you think it was to help you, get in your position, and how important were publications in this process?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. And I would say postdoc is very field specific. I think it varies widely across fields. For example, in basic science, biology, or medical sciences, I feel like postdoc is almost an essential component, which gives you more, especially, so I have always been working with human subjects. So if you're doing human subject research, or animal research, I think postdoc is very important. But if you are like in the pure engineering fields, if you are like, if I did, you know, um, electrical engineering per se, I think it's probably not that important. I know many people from your engineering math backgrounds, they would jump right into a faculty position. So yeah, so it depends where you are. And regarding publications, I think that's the number one important factor for getting any kind of job. That's like your measurement tool, I guess, how your application would be viewed. And I think every university or every doctoral program has different requirements regarding publications. For example, my uh, uh, PhD advisor, she had a requirement that we needed to have at least one or no, two first author publications. So that's the currency of a PhD, I think. So that's absolutely important. At least as far as I know. I don't know about the arts and literature side of things, but in the sciences for sure. Regarding two postdocs, I would recommend one is good enough. I had a special circumstance which made me do two. So I was at Hopkins for around 2 years, I think. Typically in my field, people would do like 3 or 4 years of postdoc. And then my husband moved to Boston, so I was looking for something in that region. And there was a very interesting project which actually helped me a lot at Mass General, and that's why I moved there. But yeah, one postdoc for 3, 4, whatever makes you accomplish your goals, have a good paper. And I think what's absolutely important in a postdoc is your mentor, your the group that you're working with, because they would be ultimately the people who would put you in contact with other universities for your future position. So like, for example, the PhD university matters a lot, where you're getting your PhD from. But for postdoc, I think your research group actually matters a lot. It's not so much about the university, but your postdoc mentor, if he is visible, if he can recommend you to a great university, I think that matters. And I think postdoc is also a great transition where you can start being independent. I would be very scared to become like a faculty right after my PhD, because I was like, it again depends what your PhD was like, right? If you were like very highly mentored, you didn't have much independence, then it would be a bit challenging to get into the role of an independent investigator. But postdoc gives you that transition phase where you can start building your own projects, write some grants, mentor other students. So it's kind of a nice transition, I feel like, into a more independent position. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Cool, thanks. And I think just like a follow-up question is, do you think like these postdoc requirements or publication requirements are any different from any candidate in the US? Or do you feel like as an international scholar, you had to do more or you had to do something different?
Not in that sense. I don't think that matters. What matters, though, I'll tell you, is when you're applying for like training grants, you have to be a US citizen or a green card holder to even apply for NIH fellowships or NIH training grants. So that's where it matters. For example, I had a T32, which I couldn't accept because I didn't have my green card then. So I think that is a hindrance. So I would strongly suggest, if you are not from India or China, try to get your green card done, which will help you a lot, not just for getting jobs, but even for applying for some fellowships, grants that are not open to international scholars. If you are from India or China, we are a bit at a disadvantage because we cannot apply for the EB2 category because it will just take you 10 years or more. So even like building that portfolio, getting in, like doing peer reviews and publications, all of that matters. So I realized both for me and my husband, we were at a disadvantage because we didn't have that. So yeah, like I would definitely encourage all of you to, think about that. I think it's actually more important in the academic field, especially in the sciences. Any like NIH, NSF, any kind of graduate or postdoctoral fellowships, you need to be a citizen or a resident to even apply for those. So those are the things that you cannot access. On the other side, you can look into, like, I think the Army and Defense, like DoD, they do have fellowships that are open to internationals, but again, it's super competitive. So it just restricts the, the funds that you can get access to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that really, we'll probably come back to that a little bit more later on, because I know a lot of our audience will be curious to know more about that topic. So Has, can you share a little bit about, again, going back to, as an international scholar, what makes you competitive? And, I know you've been looking at faculty positions. Can you share a little bit more about how that process of that journey was like for you? And
Yeah.
anything that our audience members who are interested in the same path should keep in mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I had a very unique PhD experience in a sense that I was part of a very large research consortium, which kind of really gave me a very accelerated progress into my work. I was, by the year 2, I was already collaborating with 5 to 6 research groups across the world, doing a lot of different kinds of projects. And I think that taught me a lot of things very quickly, managing collaborations on my own and so on and so forth. So last year, when I was talking with my advisor, who has been very supportive in kind of letting me run projects very independently, was to just test out the waters, the faculty market, and see how it goes. So that was sort of really the idea. And to be honest, I was not expecting to hear anything at all. But I really wanted to kind of get a sense of the market. For example, I didn't even know where one would apply, right? Is it a university portal? Or I learned later on that it's Interfolio, but it kind of changes a lot. And the requirements change a lot too between universities. So I think it really gave me a very good practice. I ended up getting 2 interviews, but I think the last cycle was also a bit unique because of the pandemic. There were not a lot of openings. But yeah, I think with international students, what I've heard, especially in my field, is that, just like Ishita was saying, there's definitely a concern about green cards, right? For example, if they cannot hire you, or you cannot go after competitive funding, that definitely, I think, puts you at a disadvantage. And I think that there are ways to mitigate that, by trying to kind of build a profile and trying to apply for EB1 and other things. But yeah, right now I'm applying both for faculty and postdoc positions, which is sort of common in my field. But yeah, it really is, I think, field specific. Yeah.
I wish you all the best with your search.
Thank you.
Marina, I think, some of our audience members do belong to like the humanities division. And I was wondering, do you have similar training requirements for your field or anything that expected, from a competitive applicant, especially if you're like an international scholar?
Yeah, so hearing Ishita and Tuva speak, it is certainly field specific, because for the humanities, the postdoc is not really a requirement or even something expected, as I see like from colleagues in the sciences. So as Suhas was saying, like most people, when they're ready to go to the job market, they start applying for both at the same time. Though increasingly the postdocs, like the deadlines are earlier. So I actually noticed like the trend is switching in the field, meaning that like usually people that are more prepared or with the dissertation more advanced will like have the conditions to apply, because sometimes you will have a deadline as early as like July or August of the year. So it does mean that you have to be ready. But So, and regarding like visa and green card and citizenship, this is a tricky question for us because I don't know, Ishita was mentioning like, or actually advising people to go ahead and get started on the green card. I haven't seen any possibilities of this. So I, for instance, still don't have one. This is something that for us in the humanities, like whenever you are applying, it's sort of implicit that the university hiring you will sponsor a work visa. In my case, this is the H-1B. Some people, if you get a postdoc, probably it's like the J-1. So it varies a lot. But it does get, and it is not a very easy transition because it will depend on the kind of, so Hopkins, for instance, is like a rich university, and this is something that gets started like as soon as you're hired. But for instance, in my case, I was hiring in the middle of the pandemic, and the government suspended the premium processing, which is what universities have access to because they can require an H-1B visa in 15 days. This was actually stopped during the pandemic, and meaning that actually this process could take months. Then I had to, for instance, do an OPT, which I'm sure that it's both for humanities and for the sciences. It's something that you can do, but even that was tricky because of the delays. So this is a long story short. It was very stressful because, you know, like especially in a moment where a lot of searches were canceled. A lot of searches that would have opened didn't open. And then especially when you're already like able to secure a job, which is so difficult at this point. And then like you're also in a, like, I think a position of vulnerability because you don't know if you're going to be able to like finish this. So this is certainly, even in the humanities, there's also a thing that when you're applying, there's always this idea that like some schools are just going to hire you if you already have some kind of work visa or citizenship. Though it is supposed like it's ethically like they shouldn't ask you this in interviews or the application process until you get an offer, and then you're in a position to discuss these things. But there are ways in which, like even like by filling up this application, you will encounter this. So usually what I was advised when I was applying was like, well, you can say that you are in a condition to start applying for work visas, because you can always say that you are, because your university, your alma mater can actually sponsor your OPT, which gives you at least 1 or 2 years to get started, and then you see what you can do. And then finally, I think in terms of publications, I think it's also different for us because in the humanities, you are expected to publish as a single author. Most of the times you will eventually collaborate. The field is changing, but it is not like a deal breaker, like the publication for a job, to secure a job position, but it's better that you have at least one good article peer-reviewed published before the job market. But I know a lot of people who got their first jobs without having a publication. Which then, like our field is actually a book field. It means that once you're in the tenure track, you're probably going to have to publish at least one book, if not two, and a lot of articles. So here is a moment in which like some people will say, well, save your publications for the tenure track. So one in the making is ideal for this moment, for this phase of the applications.
So I think I have a follow-up question with that, right? So you mentioned a little bit briefly about the timing of everything. So when do you think is the best time to like start looking at these positions, especially considering that we have all these like visa things that we need to take care of? What's the best time to start this process? And, what's the best time to like ask an employer during this process about immigration?
Okay, so for applications, I would say like usually the summer before you plan to defend your dissertation, because as Suhas was saying, like I also saw like many of my colleagues and everyone, like you usually go at least once before you get interviews or an offer. But so that year, I would say like probably your fourth year, because that's when like usually the programs take like 5 years. But you have to have in mind though that you have to have your dissertation in a point in which you could eventually finish in a semester, because if you will probably hear about an offer between January and May, let's say, and then you would have to defend in the summer. So usually the fourth year, if you have a dissertation, advanced, if not the fifth year, and then you could eventually apply for a fellowship, a writing fellowship for your sixth year, and then do this process in the fifth. In terms of when you start talking, it would be after I think at least this is what most people do, is like once you have the campus interview and you start the negotiation process.
Thank you. And I think I just want to maybe direct the same question to get a sense of what it's like in the sciences. Ishita, do you have a recommendation, especially if, you're off your F1, when's the best time to like do this, start looking at academic positions, and how do you have these conversations?
So for me, since I knew I needed a postdoc, I didn't apply for any faculty position after my PhD. I just applied to postdoc positions. And I actually used my OPT, my entire OPT at Hopkins. So if somebody is actually interested in going into industry, the OPT period is also great for getting industry jobs, because oftentimes industry will not sponsor visas, as academic institutes are more lenient towards sponsoring H-1Bs, because we can do like it's like a no cap H-1B, which is different in the industry side. So definitely use your OPT period wisely. In STEM, we do have more than 2 years of OPT, which is great. So you can pretty much, if you wanted to do a postdoc, you can pretty much do your entire postdoc on OPT. And if you are going into a faculty position, the university will definitely sponsor H-1Bs. I don't think that's an issue. When I said, visa issues is more from the point of applying for funding, which requires citizenship or being a resident. I don't think work visas is an issue for getting an academic job. I don't think so. And I started applying for, so if you are doing a postdoc like myself, I would say the best time, and since there are no deadlines in a postdoc, right? You're not defending or doing anything like that. And all the faculty jobs, mostly the deadlines are December, some might be early January, the application deadlines, I mean. Some might be as early as October or November too. So whenever your main paper is ready to be out, I think that's the best time to apply for a faculty position. Because, and I think it's also very important to have visibility, which I did not do well, I know a lot of people are very active on Twitter, having your research showcased, going to conferences. I think visibility is a very important aspect of getting a faculty position, at least in the sciences, where it's really competitive. Like everybody is awesome. Whoever it has stuck around, done a postdoc, I'm pretty sure everyone is academically very well accomplished. So I think what matters is, and I think that's where internationals are a bit at a disadvantage, especially especially people, I think Asians, they are taught to be a bit humble. So we are not great at advertising ourselves. We do not know how to, market our work. So I think that's where we are a bit disadvantaged. So I would say go around, make yourself visible, because then when you apply, they already kind of know your work. So that helps you. So those are my tips, I guess. So if you are in a postdoc, apply when your major paper has been published, or at least you have it on bioRxiv, so you can showcase it. And also if you have some training grants or some sort of fellowships, I think that helps too. And if you have mentored somebody, I think all these are elements of being a successful investigator in the sciences. So yeah, that would
Yes,
be my take on it.
Thank you. And I see we have some audience questions rolling in. So Ishita, I think I just wanted to maybe see if you could answer this one. So there's something about, is it possible to go back to academia after working in the industry for a few years? Have you come across any of your colleagues that have done something similar?
Yeah, actually, I mean, especially in engineering, that's very attractive, right? I know at UIC, where I was a graduate student, they had hired somebody who worked for a while in Bell Labs or something of that sort, and they hired him specifically because he had that industry experience. So yeah, it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, I think I know some faculty members in the pharmacology department who actually worked in industry and came back to academia. So I definitely think it is possible.
And it also happens the other way around. Like
Yeah.
people from academia often go into industry too. So it's a fluid situation, I would say.
And so since you're probably the closest to this process, is it possible to extend F1 visa so that you have more time to look for jobs?
Yeah. In fact, I was talking with my advisor just 2 weeks about this. I think there's definitely a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of, I would say, stress involved as well. Just the timing of things. I need to set the date. I need to figure out where the next position is. So I think it's definitely possible. I mean, a lot of people have done it, but I think there's always this kind of stressful moment until you get it. So we just have to get through the process. But I think I really like the point that Ishita made about having that visibility component, especially for folks in engineering. Just a few weeks back, somebody reached out to me on Twitter or a publication that I'd made and actually offered me a position, an academic position in their university. It was not a tenure track position, so I was not very keen on it, but I think just I've come to really kind of appreciate the importance of that, because I think beyond a certain stage, it is about your work, but beyond that, it's so much more about what makes you special and what makes you stand out. Very important.
Yeah, and I think just like a follow-up to that is, what are some visibility sort of tips that you have that you follow? So I know Twitter, Ishita mentioned, is big. Like, do you have your own website, or are there other ways to connect? So we heard about Twitter and conferences. What are some other things that you have used?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So the first is your email signature, especially if you're a graduate student and you're not well known. You can have a lot of links like Google's. For example, my email signature has Google Scholar, my personal website, and my Twitter link, just so that people can easily find me. And it's also easy for them to search for papers and so on and so forth. So that's one way. I would say, I think, as you develop a network, this does require a bit of work, but you can always sort of get invited to other folks, giving a talk, not only in their labs or departments. So there are a lot of ways you can sort of get your work across, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think maybe I need to go back and work on that as well. So I think the other audience question that we have is about, I think it's a broader sense of skill set. And that's something we can talk about a little bit. Do you have any comments and advice on teaching skills? I'm not feeling prepared for the faculty world since I don't have much teaching experience. So is teaching experience important? And does this help, again, with your visibility, or are there other skills that you think we need to be mindful of as we prepare with our academic job search? Marina, I think I'll have you start us off with this.
Yeah, so yes, for the humanities, definitely teaching experience is very important. And some positions, so I'm in a department of modern languages, and I don't teach language. I only teach culture, literature, or any courses on theory, but most jobs are jobs that are sort of hybrid, that you would teach both a foreign language and something that is connected to your research. And then in that sense, you will, some colleagues that got especially positions at liberal colleges, they were actually asked to give a teaching demonstration. So you see like how important this is. In my case, I had to do a job talk. So, I mean, you still have to do a little bit of public, speaking, but it's not, teaching, you're going to be definitely you're asked for your teaching evaluations and stuff like this. So one advice I would give for that, because I did my PhD at Princeton, and compared to other language departments, like we don't have a ton of teaching experience. We only had to teach 3 semesters compared to my colleagues at Columbia, for instance, which is a great school, but they had to teach like 8 semesters. So when you get there, you're like much more experienced. So my advice would be to seek maybe opportunities. I did actually, I volunteered and I teach for a whole year. I taught literature for a prison teaching initiative. And it was like really helpful because of actually that not only gives you a teaching experience, but also like makes you think about like diversity issues in the classroom and like a lot of situations that you encounter that I think are very important, for the discussions we're having today in academia that has to do with like inclusion, equity, diversity, etc. One thing that I think is I just wanted to follow up on the questions before about industry. Just if we have, I don't know if we have a lot of humanists in the audience, but this is totally different for the humanities, because I don't know anyone who has started an academic career, went off, to like industry to work with something else and returned. You can do it before, but there is not so much, transit in the same way as in the humanities. And when it comes to like actually publicizing yourself, this is interesting too, because in the humanities it's super tricky, because you will probably be giving a lot of like political opinions on your Twitter feed that they can then definitely interfere with like your stability. Although one very cool thing that is happening in the field right now is like more and more people are putting pressure for like public facing writing to be counted for your tenure, which a lot of humanists already do and feel that they need to do, but it's tricky to navigate this. So for instance, when I was actually preparing to go in the job market, one of the sort of advices that I saw someone that was like had the professional development thing was like, delete your Twitter account or your Instagram for now. So it's just like, I just wanted to bring this up to go back to, I think, Ishita's first point about how much things are field specific.
That's so interesting to know.
Right?
I never thought that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, but I'm learning a lot from the two of you here. So yeah.
I guess science is more unbiased. I think of it as like that. So maybe that's why, although nowadays science is also being politicized. So you never know.
Yeah, speaking of like soft skills, I think one of the other things that, again, you mentioned about, having to give a talk, does it seem like an equitable process for someone who's not a native English speaker, right? I think a lot of us, English isn't our first language. And sometimes I think we're worried about like implicit bias, right? Like, how am I being judged when I'm speaking and explaining myself in a language that doesn't come to me? So have you had any experiences with this, while giving a job talk? And did you think that your interviewers had some kind of bias with the way you talk? And what are some best ways to, overcome this kind of bias? I think I will have Marina just comment on the importance of language, because she is a language expert. And then I think we'll move to Ishita to know a little bit about what her experience was like.
Thank you. This is a tough question, because especially if you're thinking about like, so let's say, and I'm of course speaking from a language department. So sometimes being an international scholar has advantages in the sense that like the target language is one that you master, right? But and this is also true, let's say, for anthropology or sociology, like things that would require sometimes skills that an international scholar will have, and could even be an advantage, right? Because you will have sometimes a much more cosmopolitan and global sort of set of skills. On the other hand, you're right that you are being judged, because in the end, you have to function in an English language university. So there are a lot of skills that you have to develop. And I agree with you, like it is hard to access like implicit bias, because like this is like unsaid often, and then you are not aware like of the things. But it is true that like I do feel that there's a difference when you're trying to communicate, and this is something that like I think can count a lot. So one thing that I found useful, unfortunately a little bit too late in my PhD, but like the sort of things that you're doing here, so like, you know, workshops to understand how to navigate this, as you know, and then use your characteristics as an international scholar to your advantage. Writing programs, which are like in the university, in the sense that like you get feedback on your writing, because it's different, like especially like in our departments in Latin America and in Europe, like the writing styles are so different. They're much more essayistic rather than, you know, in the format that we're expected to write here. So get feedback and train. I mean, conferences are really good, and sharing work. I think this would be my advice, because the more you expose yourself and get feedback, and you do this in like a sort of like more informal environments, then the easiest it's going to be when you're there for the real thing, right? For the moment.
Absolutely. And Ishita, can you comment a little bit more about your experience with this? When you had to give your job talk, if you did, what did that feel like? And do you have any tips for international scholars who don't speak English as their first language?
I think you have to practice more, since we are at a disadvantage from that perspective. I think stand in front of the mirror, practice, or give a talk to your, you know, friends, even to your family. And I think the more you speak, the more fluent you become. And I would say, at least from my experience, people will not really judge at the, you know, the how correct English or grammatically correct English you're speaking, as long as you can communicate your ideas. I have heard talks from people who are not native speakers give like a much way better talk than somebody who is a native speaker. So I think, yeah, I mean, language is a means of communication, but you don't have to speak Shakespeare English, right, to communicate well. I think communication is an art, and you can master it, whatever your first language is. So, and I think as an international scholar, people might actually even give you a little bit of a leeway, thinking that, okay, English is not her first language. So they might in fact evaluate you a bit more leniently on the language front. I don't think language should be a barrier to that. And even like when we, you know, evaluate grants and things like that, if the English is not perfect, we never evaluate it on that. It's all the science or your proposal that matters end of the day. So yeah, I think that's my experience.
Yeah, and I think I want to sort of like split. I think we've spoken about all these like disadvantages, whether coming to like the grants that we can apply to, or like how we're perceived. But I think what are some things that we bring as international students, right? Like it was very inspiring to me, for example, to learn that 2 new Nobel laureates in physiology medicine are both immigrants, right? So I think we do add so much to academia here, and new innovations and discoveries, that I think it's also important to highlight things that make us unique and our backgrounds that can make us better scientists. So, and especially since a lot of us also do belong to underrepresented, I think, groups within science, right? You know, we're international, but in addition to that, for example, like I think women are also like lower in STEM or like other groups. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about how to bring in your identity and who you are to make you a better candidate. And Suhas, you know, I would love to know if you have anything to add to this topic.
Yeah, I think that when you're going on an academic job market, you know, a lot of the times they ask for the diversity statement, where you can kind of make your case as to how, you know, your kind of your own background has made you sort of unique, and also how you're going to sort of contribute to the diversity and inclusion and equity efforts on sort of campus. And I think that that's really a great place for you to kind of connect science to sort of your personal journey as well. For example, in my case, I belong to the LGBTQ community, and as a gay person, to me, I really value an institution where LGBTQ folks are respected, they're protected, and that was a big concern. That's one of the reasons I wanted to start early, because I wanted to kind of get the lay of the land, because I sometimes feel that some of the choices are sort of much narrower, because I have heard negative things about certain places and how they kind of treated some of their own faculty, right? I always say, go to a place where you're not tolerated, but you're celebrated, right? I don't want to go to a place where they just tolerate me, right? So I think it's very important to kind of be authentic and just go to a place where everybody can uplift each other.
That's awesome. Ishita, do you have anything to add to, what makes you unique, and how did you use your international background to get, your faculty position?
I don't think I did anything special to, but I just feel like your background shouldn't matter. What matters is your work, your achievements. We should all be blind to, the race or whatever your background is. According to me, it doesn't matter. Like when for example, I was hiring for a research assistant, and you have to be cognizant of your implicit bias, but then you have to make a decision based on that person's capabilities, right? Not what he is in his or her personal life. So that's where I come from. Like, yeah, we just need to focus on what you can bring to the table and celebrate that and uplift that. It really doesn't matter. The rest doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's wonderful to know that there are people like you who are recruiting and who are willing to see, candidates for what they bring to the table. So I think it's very positive to hear that. And Marina, do you have anything to add to this about?
I think I would second what they were saying. I just maybe would add that because we, like the humanities department, this is like today, I would say really important, because there is like a conscious effort to diversify. So I actually am right now in a search committee, and like I had to do this training of like implicit bias. So it's interesting, like this is like mandatory for everyone. There's usually like a diversity advocate in the committees. So it is something that I think is changing. But I think that in humanities department, this is so important, because like you're always questioning, like you always have political issues that you have to do all the time. So this is, I would say that the background does matter, in the sense that, you are, at least like as an impression that where the field is going, it's like you want people who can be, at the cusp of their fields, but you also want to diversify that. So this is something that it's going to be hopefully taken into consideration.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we did have an audience question that came in when they registered, which was, after you get the job, what's the hardest part about being, a faculty? And, are there any challenges that come with that? And is that something that we should be mindful of when we are applying? So Ishita, do you have any comments or anything from your experience that you would like to share?
There are a lot of challenges. I would say. But I think my main challenge was not having a boss, being your own boss. I think was my main challenge. Not having somebody to tell me kind of what to do, but figuring it out yourself, because now you are responsible for other people. So there's like a shift in paradigm when somebody else was responsible for me. Right now, you are. It's kind of like when you leave your parents' house and live by yourself. It's almost like that, I feel like. So challenges associated with that, you have to figure out, like administrative stuff. You have to call people 100 times before they will respond because now you are in charge. So I think, and the rest, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the rest are okay, but I think that that was my major, and especially in the time because I joined during a pandemic, so I couldn't really communicate with a lot of my colleagues, but that's not a general problem, I would say. But that's specific to both. I think Marina probably had a similar experience, challenges of joining a new position in the pandemic is, it's like, it just doubles your challenges.
Yeah. Maria, do you think there are any challenges that you feel like it's there as a, a faculty who's from an international background, especially?
Well, I just want to second what Ishita said about like being on the other side all of a sudden and then trying to, I think what also for me is like a big challenge is actually how do you sort of like try not to reproduce the things that you encountered that were so bad in your process, right? So like implicit bias, I don't know, a lot of unethical behaviors, like availability. I don't know. It's so this is like a big thing, like constantly thinking about trying to be what you actually most admired in the different mentors and professors that you've encountered. And the other thing I always try to juggle without having a boss like directly juggle research and teaching and administrative functions, which is like your time just becomes like time management is like a challenge, especially in that, like, I think the international question comes into like, because I also feel that the sort of, you mentioned Ishita earlier, like how Asians are like taught to be humble, and this is a quality that's the same thing in Latin America, like like you're like regarded as a good academic, that like the humbler you are, and this is totally not the case here. So, and in the same way of like how you sort of like, I don't know, deal with your daily activities without getting into it, because one thing that we have to say, like the US tends to like, I don't know, just reward people who just work themselves to exhaustion. And this, I think the pandemic taught us that this is something that has to be questioned, because like you can still be very productive and a great professional, but taking mental health issues seriously, so this is for me also a challenge, because I wasn't raised like this. So I'm trying to like see how I can navigate this and accomplish what I'm supposed to accomplish without, becoming ill.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of us, international scholars, we have this feeling that we need to do a lot more to like prove our merit, like why we are here, and how much more we have to do to show that we deserve anything that comes our way. I think that really adds and gets exhausting. So at least like one of my biggest takeaway from this session and hearing from all of you is that, things, the way we're working is fine. And maybe the challenge of ending up with an academic position isn't necessarily as difficult as it would be for, someone who's in the US, for example, or someone who's a citizen. So I'm definitely leaving with that kind of feeling, and I hope that's not wrong.
I think you're right. I don't think, especially in academics, internationals are as disadvantaged as if you went on to the industry side, right? It's the fact that most university professors are immigrants is a testament to that. Like if you look at any university site, I think a lot of the faculty are immigrants. So I think that tells you that
it's probably easier to get into academia as an international scholar than it is to get into the industry.
Yeah, probably depends on the industry too. Like if you are an IT professional, I guess it's not that hard to get an IT job as compared to like something in maybe neuroscience science or, I don't know about the mechanical engineering fields, who has might know better.
And I think that's one last question before we wrap up. And I'm going to direct this to Sahas because he touched on this a little bit. Do you have any thoughts about the diversity statement in the job application from an international perspective?
Sure. I'm going to give you the pragmatic answer of what really happens in the engineering per se, right? So the faculty search committee, to be honest, are not that serious about the diversity statement. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. Okay? Of course, what it should be is a different matter, right? I think, I think as Ishita was kind of leaning on earlier, they do kind of look at your work first. But in my personal opinion, I think that you're joining the institution to be, I think, a professor, and teaching is a big component of it, right? And mentoring also is another big component. And I think especially a lot of the professors, they may not kind of, tell you during the talk, but they're also looking at ways you can communicate, the ways you deal with different professors or different students. And that all kind of really goes into, can you be a team member who can create an inclusive environment on campus, okay? That's what is, I think, important. So when you're writing a diversity statement, I think that it doesn't require that you be awarded diversity awards or anything like that, but talk about what kind of an environment you can help build in your future workplace. And, departments often have committees and other things. And mention in your statement that you would like to really volunteer, pick things that you're passionate about, not just something you have to do. That way, it's more fun for you and meaningful for you.
Thank you. And to quote my favorite Albus Dumbledore, time is making fools of us again. So it's almost 1 o'clock. I just want to, on behalf of our audience, thank you so much for taking time, for being here today, and for breaking down a lot of these barriers and challenges that maybe we made bigger for ourselves. So thank you for being here and empowering our international scholars. We really, really appreciate all your wisdom that you had to share. Thank you so much.